Good morning. My name is Dennis Morgan with D.L. Morgan and Associates, and we're working through the FirstPic as well as with the Department of Housing and Urban Development to present the program on the Public Housing Assessment System, better known as FASS, that comes through the world of REACT, the Real Estate Assessment Center as well. In the first module, we focused on the introductions of the particular protocol, and this is the second module where we're going to go deep into the world of the physical assessment subsystem, better known as PHAS. And in this system, it's an important piece of the world of the FASS scoring system because this one is worth 40 points. 40 points. So in the introduction, scoring, and planning and tracking phase, that we also introduce some concepts that help in the performance of the agency as well. We're going to further introduce those concepts that will also focus on the world of the physical inspection as well. Now, some of the materials also that we'll be presenting are available on the REACT website on the PAS indicator as well. So we always encourage you to visit those HUD websites, to look at those materials and get the latest in terms of that piece of the protocol. But in addition to that, we're going to show you some other tools that you can also use to help evaluate internal to the world of the housing authorities as well. As previously mentioned in slide number 1, my background comes from the world of housing authorities and running housing authorities for the first 30 plus years of my career. I've been in the business now for 50 years, either running housing authorities or providing technical assistance to housing authorities. And so I know that everything doesn't necessarily land in the world of HUD. That is very valuable resources and very valuable tools. So we're going to be looking at those tools as well from a PHAS perspective and the things that you can internally do to monitor the performance of the agency, both inside the world of FASS, but also outside that world of FASS to increase the performance of the agency as well. In module number 2, we're going to focus on the physical assessment subsystem. And we know that we're under the interim rule. And under the interim rule, we're looking at then the weighted average of that particular AMP that has an overall impact in terms of the scoring of the agency as well. And the bottom line is that we are ensuring that we're keeping these units decent, safe, and sanitary and good repair. And unlike the previous systems in which you would have a form of self-evaluation that you would send your inspectors through, or you would have your management agents go through, and then it used to be an HQS standard, that no longer applies. You will have an independent inspector that'll be coming through and applying the concepts known as a Uniform Physical Conditions Standard, better known as UPCS. UPCS. And it's important to understand in this physical, not only are you applying UPCS, but you're going to be applying the latest protocol for the UPCS standard as well, which is foundation upon a dictionary of terms that also has been slightly modified through what's known as a compilation bulletin. In other words, things have evolved, things have changed. And as a result of that, it's not only understanding that dictionary of terms, but it's also understanding the latest protocol, such as HUD now uses a standard on what's called an NIS standard, that if your repairs are made in a non-industry standard technique, that it will be inspected and points will be deducted in the world of FASS because you're doing the repairs in a non-industry standard state. Now, what are we talking about? Well, I'm now repairing a door, and on that door, let's say the laminate is coming loose, and so the door is separating. So now my maintenance personnel fixes a door, but just by putting screws in that door to push that laminate back on the door. And that's how they make the repair. That would be a non-industry standard, because a proper repair would be to properly glue it, clamp it, and then of course remove the clamps after the glue now is set and taken hold of the door. That would be a proper repair. In other words, giving it the appearance that no repair was actually made there. I'm now looking at the drywall. I'm now looking at the sheetrock on the wall. And instead of using sheetrock to make the repair, somebody has just now gone on and screwed pieces of plywood over the hole. Well, that's a non-industry standard repair. So even though a repair has been made, and previously even HUD would probably have accepted that form of repair in the world of REACT, they no longer will accept that. Now, where are you going to find that information? It's going to be in the compilation bulletins. It's going to be in the updated information as well. So in the PHAS system, in the physical assessment subsystem, that you have 6 areas. 5 of those areas then have additional percentage points associated with it as well. And then you have what I call that double dinger area, and that is that health and safety. Health and safeties will not only take away points from the site or building exterior or building systems or dwelling units or common areas, but it'll also take away additional points based upon the health and safety. And the health and safety will be subdivided into 2 areas. One is called LT, better known as life-threatening, and the other is NLT, better known as a non-life-threatening as well. So within the physical scoring system that now occurs within each AMP, that you will have then points associated with the site, building exterior, building systems, dwelling units, and common areas. Now, if all areas are present and all functional areas within that area are present as well, then site is generally worth 15 points. Building exterior, worth 15 points. Building systems are worth 20 points. Dwelling units worth 35 points. And common areas worth 15 points. That will give you then your 100 points that are associated with that particular AMP or that particular physical units as well. And then I have that health and safety. Like I say, that's that double dinger. So if I get a health and safety, such as a tripping hazard, not only will I have then, let's say, damaged sidewalk on the site, but I also have then a tripping hazard. And that tripping hazard is an additional hazard that's going to take away additional points as well. So within the physical structure, within the property, within the AMP, that I'm looking at then the site, I'm looking at the exterior of the building, I'm looking at the building systems, I'm looking at the common area, the dwelling units. Each one of them has points associated with it. And then I have that, which I call that double dinger, which is that health and safety. You cannot score well in the world of REACT if you have health and safety concerns or health and safety issues on that site. So for example, I'm now looking at your site. And as I'm looking at your site, I see where I've got then a light pole. And in that light pole, a lawnmower has now hit the area where the electrical outlet is now, where you can then change out and disconnect when you're working on that pole as well. But now they've damaged that, and they're now exposing those wires in that area. Well, not only am I now having a damage to a light pole or light fixture, but also I've got exposed wires. That exposed wires is now creating electrical hazard. That exposed wires is a health and safety. That exposed wires is a LT, a life-threatening. So not only am I going to lose points on the pole, but also I'm going to lose points on the fact that it is a health and safety, and that health and safety can take away 5 or 6 points on that one item alone on that site. So it's important that we're very attentive to these health and safeties. And I'm going to show you how that's determined then within that dictionary of terms as well. In terms of the overall, the point systems that's associated with the PHAS it's a 40-point system. So what you also do is you take that 100-point system, and I'll convert it then to a 40-point system to determine then the final outcome for that AMP, and then further determine the final outcome based upon the weighted average of the units in the AMP to determine my final outcome for the score in the FASS as well. These PHAS standards do not supersede or preempt state or local building codes or maintenance codes as well. However, the housing agency should be prepared to provide information to the inspector prior to undertaking the inspection in case that protocol is different. Now, if an inspector still says he's disregarding that and still applying then a different standard, then that would be grounds for an appeal. And in my appeal, I'm going to then show HUD that this is my determination based upon then the local standards. So for example, you're up in New York City, and New York City has a standard on child safety guards. And early on, the inspectors were inspecting saying this is blocking egress. But the housing authority had to comply with these code requirements in terms of the buildings as well. Well, HUD, through an appeal process, and restored those points back to the New York City Housing Authority because it was a local code requirement. And then HUD later, in a compilation bulletin, included the fact for all inspectors, when you're inspecting these types of properties and these types of communities, as long as it's a good breakaway system, it's not then permanently blocking a form of egress in there as well, then it is allowable and should not then be reflected as a deficiency and causing point reductions as well. In order to be classified at least as a standard agency or as a high performing agency as well, then I also must achieve at least 60% of the points available under PHAS, or at least 24 of those points, in order to not to be classified as a substandard agency. If I fall below 24, then I'm going to be classified as a substandard PHAS, substandard physical. And at that time, I would also have then a workout plan associated with that as well. So we've had changes to what's known as a dictionary of deficiencies. And it's important that we understand that dictionary because it's a foundation for our scoring system. It's a foundation of how you're going to be evaluated under this indicator as well. Within that, some deficiencies were also then added because HUD also wanted to provide then further clarification. They've added this new standard, which is called the non-industry standard repairs. And if you're making the repair, but you're doing it in a fashion that is a non-industry standard, then it's still considered a deficiency, and it's going to then count points against you as well. And so, for example, let's say I'm also looking at the tiles on the floor, and I can't match that tile. And so I'm just putting down another tile. Well, it's covering so many square feet of that particular area. And after it gets above a certain threshold, then I probably should retile the entire section of that floor and not just then do piecemeal work in terms of the tiling of the floor. It would be considered then a non-industry standard. So HUD updates that dictionary, the dictionary of terms, through what's called these compilation bulletins. And we're going to show you the compilation bulletin and how to interpret that, but it's also very important that you're getting that into the hands of your management personnel, you're getting in the hands of your maintenance personnel, because that's also going to bring them up to date in terms of the latest, in terms of the current protocol that HUD is using to inspect you under the programs as well. A housing authority, when it's also abating what's called the exigent health and safety issues as well, can take corrective action, and you want to remedy those situations within 24 hours. The abatement of the exigent health and safety condition also means I could be moving that tenant out of that particular hazardous condition, which would be a 24-hour condition. When you're also doing the inspection, the inspector is going to issue a exigent health and safety report at the end of the inspection on those particular units of the AMP. And so you want to then sign for it. But also, if there's also problems on that particular report, these are LTs, these are life-threatening, and it must be also repaired within 24 hours. Now, you'll also go back into the world of REACT, into the reporting system, because you also will report back to REACT that also that repair on those particular items was made. And you must report that back to REACT within 72 hours. 72. So 24 hours to make the repair, 72 hours then to re-upload that information in terms of that repair work that also was done as a result of that 24-hour repair item as well. Now, in addition to that, that exigent health and safety report is also going to now have a projection in terms of other items on the property. That if I looked at every one of the units based upon the sampling that I also found on the health and safety issues as well. Be attentive to that. Because if you also are looking at that report and you see these repeat type items, then you might have systematic or systemic issues as relates to health and safety on that site. So you might want to then schedule and go through the rest of your units as well to make repairs and just double check. And maybe people are missing items that they shouldn't be missing that are health and safety concerns for that particular agency or that particular development as well. In terms of the weighted average, the weighted average is then taken then based on the amp. So I'll take then the number of units. I'm going to convert it then to a 40-point system. So in other words, let's say I scored 80. Well, 80 on a 40-point system, I'll take 80 times 0.40. That gives me 32 points. So that particular amp then scores in 32 on a 40-point system times in the number of units. I'll do that for each one of the amps, accumulate that into the numerator, and then divide that then by the total number of units. So it's going to take the 100-point system, that is then what you receive on the property, and convert it to a 40-point system, take the weighted average, and that is going to determine then your final score overall for the housing agency under the PHAS indicator. And we're going to break that down. We're going to show you some examples as well. And we're actually going to be working through a problem so that you can see how this system ultimately comes out with a score for the housing authority as well. Now, let's say I'm on a 3-2-1 year rotation that we talked about before. So in those cases as well, I'll take that 3-year period and I'll roll that then year by year by year, unless I get labeled cap troubled or unless I get labeled then as a troubled agency as well. So here I have my score, and my score says on this property number 1 or amp number 1, I scored an 86. I now multiply that times 0.40, so on that property in a 40-point system, it's 34.4. What is that also telling me? Well, on an 86 property, if I was a large PHA, then that amp would be inspected then every 2 years, unless I was troubled or unless I was cap troubled. Property number 2, I scored 90. On a 40-point system, 90 times 0.40 gives me 36. Property number 3 scored a 65. What is that also telling me? Well, that property is also subject to an inspection next year because it's going to be set up on an annual inspection. 65 times 0.40 gives me 26 on amp number 3 on a 40-point system. Now I'll take then that score. The 86 was converted then to, on a 40-point system, to 34.4. Multiplied then times the number of units. That gives me then 2,064. That's the weight, that's the product of that particular amp. Property number 2 scored 90 on a 40-point system. That's 36 times then 103 units. That gives me 3708 as a product. Property number 3 scored a 65 on a 40-point system. That's 26 times 196. That gives me 5,096. Now I add 2,064 plus 3,708 plus 5,096. That gives me a total of 10,868. I now take the 10,868, divide that by the total number of units, which is 359. That gives me a overall FASS score for the PHA of 30.3. In this situation, I now have my weighted average of each one of these amps. Which one of the amps had the highest weight? Which one of the amps had the highest impact on the agency? Well, amp number 3. Amp number 3 was 196 units. It was half or more than half of your dwelling units in that particular scoring system, and it had the higher impact. So what did it do? It brought your score down because of its high weight. And so if I'm looking at anything to get this agency back on track, to get this score up, I'm going to be focusing here on AMP number 3, which is my highest weight, and it's also impacting my score. So here I got 30.3. So the question is, could I also make high performing status for this agency? Could I? And the answer would be yes, it's possible. How would I do it? Well, I'd have to be perfect under my capital and get my 10 points there. I would have to be perfect under my management, getting my 25 points there. And I would also have to be perfect under the financials and getting my points there. If I lost a point anywhere else along the way, then the best I could do would be a standard agency. I'm at 30.3, so I could get my 90, but I could only get my 90 if I would be perfect in all other areas. In all probability, is this agency going to be a high performer? In all probability, probably not. Probably I'm going to potentially look at my points and I might have trouble with my MAS, or I might have trouble with my financials, or I might have trouble with my cap as well. So in all probability, you're probably moving towards standard. How can I get this agency to improve? Well, look at this score of 65. They're going to be back next year. They're going to be back next year. So in that case, I'm going to be reevaluated on this particular site. If I can get this site up into the 80s or 90s, then it's going to be much easier to achieve than high performing status for this agency as well, because now I won't be sitting on 30.3. I'm going to be sitting on a much, much better number, like a 35 or a 36 out of 40 points potentially available on that properties, on that agency as well. So how do I improve then my physical inspection score? The very first thing you want to understand is you have to understand UPCS. That's the standard. Now, I know HUD is looking at making changes to the UPCS platform and moving over to the Inspire platform. They're not there yet. They're not there in making all these changes yet. However, it generally is going to be into the future that we're going to be making that change. But until they make that transition, you're still foundation upon UPCS. And we also know that we had a period of time under the coronavirus that they weren't doing these independent inspections as well. HUD is now starting some of those back up. So again, prepare yourselves for the latest world of HUD and the changes that are occurring inside the world of HUD. Maintain an accurate inventory in terms of my PIC information and my unit inventory, because also a person should not be, those independents should not be inspecting vacant units. They should be validating and verifying that they are vacant, but they should not be inspecting a vacant unit in public housing as well. Analyze, look at last year's reports, look at these systemic issues, look at these systematic issues that are causing me to lose points. I don't want to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. I want to address these issues. I want to put some capital funds behind it. I want to then address the fact that maybe I have blocking egress where residents are putting air conditioners in windows and blocking points of egress. Then I might want to be thinking about how to cut sleeves into the building as well. And then so they can just slip them underneath those windows as well, so they're not blocking the window, not blocking a point of egress. So look in your designs, think about what I can be doing to address some of these issues as well. Inspecting 100% of your units annually, regardless of whether REACT is inspecting. I want to be inspecting 100%, and then taking then the necessary repair actions. It's one thing to inspect, but what you're after is the repair. So I want to program staff. I want to program money. I want to program subcontractors. I want to program, temps. I want to program so that not only do I identify the error, but also and identify the deficiency, but I set systems in place to address those and put repair actions in place. Otherwise, these become what I call, I'll get around to it. And so they don't get around to it. Well, you're going to see, the inspector's going to see the same problems that you saw when you did your inspection as well. So you have to have those necessary follow-ups. You got to then not only do the inspections and inspect your units, but also put priorities behind it and then start addressing those issues as well. Perform that routine maintenance on all sites and systems. Don't don't just inspect your dwelling units, but also you want systems in place to look at your sites, look at your building systems, look at your building exteriors. So it's not just a matter of inspecting a unit because a tenant is occupying the unit, but look at all your systems. Back when I back when I was running housing authorities at the Lucas Metropolitan Housing Authority, which is up in Toledo, Ohio, in that one we had systems so that every year we physically with a team went out and looked at all of our sites and looked at all the conditions from top to bottom. And we would record all the deficiencies, and then we would assign those deficiencies for then repair work, whether it went to the property manager or whether it went to the site supervisor, whether it went to the director of maintenance or whether it went to my director of technical services or whoever then was going to be accountable and responsible for taking those repair actions. And each year, buildings got better, improvements got better. So we generally scored in the 90s. We were a high performing housing authority, even though we were a very, very, very large housing authority. And so by staying on top of these kind of things, don't wait for the world to react. So we had systems in place, not only of doing our units, and we would then quality assurance and quality control inspections on the inspectors as well, just to make sure that they're knowing what they're looking at and how to address it as well. Focus on also repairing health and safety deficiencies immediately. Drill it into staff. If you can see it, they can see it. They can see it, they're going to score me. They can see it, they're going to take away points. And I got to repair it anyway. So if you can see it, fix it. Fix it. Fix it. Fix it now. Health and safeties. These are LTs, these are NLTs. These are high ticket items. So drill it into those staff as well. When you're in those units, be looking for other forms of health and safeties and take corrective actions on those units as well. Focus on these high impact variables as well. What are we talking about? Well, a bathroom door has more points associated with it than a bedroom door. Not that I won't repair the bedroom door, but I'm going to focus on the bathroom door first. A fire rated door or an exterior door will have higher point value associated with it than, again, an interior bedroom door. So focus on these items first because these are where your points lie. Focus on your tripping hazard. Focus on your cutting hazards. Focus on these areas that have high point values as well. Have systems in place for QC work on both my management and my maintenance. In other words, I want to go out and I want to sample the maintenance work orders. It could be 5% of the work orders. I just go out once a month or once every week or whatever it might be to take a sampling of their work orders to make sure that they're making the repairs in the industry standard protocol. Because they'll just turn in a work order, but is a work order now reflecting a proper repair? Focus QC on your management. Focus, again, have systems in place. If your managers are inspecting units on your annualized basis, run sampling. Take 5% of the sample and go out and then take a look at them. If you use an independent contractor, then sample their work. You're paying them, but you want to make sure you're sampling the work and making sure that they're not walking past potential defects as well. That is going to then potentially lower your score. Criticality is something that HUD doesn't really, or inspectors don't really talk about, but criticality is absolutely important to the outcome of your physical score. And criticality is one of 5 levels that reflect the relative importance of deficiency of an inspectable item. Now, what are we talking about? Well, a switch plate cover is more critical than, let's say, damage to a countertop. So that switch plate cover that would be missing, exposing electrical wire of 110 volts, is a health and safety issue, and that's going to have a criticality of 5. Damage to a countertop or damage to, let's say, a sign, while it might be important, then only has a criticality of, let's say, 1. or 2. And so under criticality, if it has a level 5, it has a value of 5. So within the matrix, within the scoring system, the higher the criticality, the higher the value, the higher the impact. Now, in the publication of the Dictionary of Terms, HUD then published then those criticality levels. It's the only place that you're going to see it. It goes to the heart of the scoring system. It goes to the heart of how many points are going to be then further deducted based upon then the number of units, based on the number of buildings, based upon then the matrix that was designed to then have this scoring system that is used to evaluate the conditions of housing across the nation. And it applies that same protocol then would apply whether I'm in California, New York, or Florida. The same protocol is going to be applied based upon then the characteristics of the development and then based upon then the criticality of the nature of the defect. So it's based upon the importance. It's reflected in the criticality value. And so, for example, that 110 volt outlet with a missing cover is more critical than surface to a countertop. More points associated with that cover. More points associated that's going to then lower your score. Everybody starts with a perfect picture. Everybody starts with 100 points. And every time there's a defect, ding, 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 then it just takes away from your perfect picture. And depending again on the value, it could take away then 5 or 6 points, or it could take away a half a point, or it could take away less than a half a point. So it goes to the heart of the criticality, and it goes to the heart of the level. An exterior door or a bathroom door has more impact than a bedroom door. A fire rated door has more impact than a regular exterior door as well. So if I have a fire rated door, always be looking at that panic hardware, always be looking at that pumping mechanism, always be making sure that everything is functioning as well and all the parts are then functioning on that door. And it should close properly as well. Safety and security on fencing has a higher criticality than a non-safety and non-security fence. So now I'm looking at a perimeter fence and I'm looking at an interior fence. That perimeter fence that is 4 feet or above is designed to be part of your safety and security fencing, has a higher impact than that non-security fence the inside of, let's say, your area as well. Safety security, higher impact, higher criticality, more points associated with the deduction that would come from that. Blocking egress, infestation, tripping hazard, broken glass. You're creating other forms of hazard, tripping hazards, blocking egress in case of fire. LTs, broken glass, forms a cutting hazard, going to have a high impact. These are health and safety concerns, and therefore going to have higher criticalities and higher points that are be taken away based upon the criticality as well. All health and safeties will generally, again, rise to the level of level 3s, and LTs generally will also rise to the level of criticalities of 5. So they're going to be looking at big points associated with it as well. Severity. This is what the inspector calls out. He's going to call out severity. He's going to call out and call out whether it's a 3, a 2, or a 1. Some items have multiple severities, so it might have a 1, 2, or 3. So for example, I'm now looking at a roof, and it's based on the number of squares, the number of then missing shingles based upon the number of squares. Less than 1 will be a level 1, 1 to 2, take me up to a 2, over 2, take me up to a level 3. So level, it's the extent of the damage. I'm looking at a stove, and I got 1 burner out, take me to a level 2, 2 burners out, 2 or more, take me to a level 3. So in terms of the severity, this is what inspectors call out. They won't call out criticality. They're not even trained on criticality. They're trained on severities. They're going to call out for the deficiency, whether it's a 3, 2, or 1. They'll also then call out location. So you will always be accompanying the inspector. You want to then, it's going to come in on your report. He's going to take pictures of the level threes and any health and safeties on the conditions as well. If you need clarification and you think it's a different level, discuss it with them at that particular time. Levels are not appealable. Non-observable deficiencies are appealable. So they'll call out for location, they'll call out for deficiencies within his DCD, better known as your data collection device, that he has a dictionary of terms, and you can get clarification at that particular point. Don't argue with your inspector, because he can continue to inspect without then calling out deficiencies as well. But generally, you can always ask for clarification, and you then should know that dictionary of terms, so then you can ask for that additional clarification and hopefully get it clarified at that particular time. Severities of 3 have a multiplier value within the matrix of 1. Therefore, they have higher impact. Severity 2's multipliers of 0.50, severities of 1 have a multiplier of 0.25. So you can see that severities of 3 within the matrix, within the scoring system, have greater impact on the overall score as well. Things that you want to be watching for: handrails required on 4 or more consecutive steps. Be looking for these tripping issues, greater than a 3/4 inch differential. That also includes elevator alignment. So the elevator should align so it's not then out of line when it comes to the floor, because if it's greater than 3/4 inch differential, that is a tripping hazard. Whether it's an LT, whether it's an NLT. And all LTs and NLTs are going to rise to the levels of 3, but not all level 3s are LTs or NLTs. Now, how am I going to know that? Because it's going to be in the dictionary of terms. It's going to be in the protocol as well. Health and safety, or the H&S deficiencies, can also substantially then reduce the overall property score. Health and safeties is what I call the double dinger. So additional points are deducted then based upon the severity level and based upon the criticality as well. Health and safety can be an inspectable area, can be a separate area as well. So for example, that I'm now looking at the air quality, and that also includes mold. I'm also looking at air quality, which also includes propane gases or other forms of gases as well. I'm now looking at health and safety, and within that health and safety, elevators also are in that same form of classification, as well as then garbage and debris on the both interior and exterior as well is also in the health and safety or infestation. So inspectable area or a separate area as well. Within the reports that are going to be generated, that you're going to see a numeric score, and then you're going to see whether you're going to get an A, a B, or a C. It's going to have a numeric score, and then right behind it, it's going to have an A, a B, or a C. An A means that that property or that particular amp had no health and safeties. If I have at least one non-life-threatening, it's going to have a B. If I have at least one life-threatening, it's going to have a C. So you should be able then, when you're downloading your information in terms of your property scores, it's going to have then a numeric score, let's say 90A, and then it's going to have either a star or no star. The star is going to indicate whether you had a smoke alarm deficiency on the property or smoke detector deficiency on the property. No star means I had no smoke detectors. So your score is going to have then a numeric score, it's going to have then an A, B, or C, and it's going to have then a star or no star. So inspectors are also going to then provide you a list of every health and safety deficiency on the property. You sign for that inspector. Inspectors are going to upload that information to the World of HUD at the end of their inspection. And then within 72 hours, you are going to make the within 24 hours, you're going to make the repair on the deficiency. And then within 72 hours, you will then re-report back to HUD in terms of those deficiencies that now all had corrective action. I also strongly encourage you, when you also pass this off to maintenance or you pass it off to your manager in terms of getting those repairs made, that you go in and take a look. You just want to validate because you're certifying as to all this information is true and accurate, and that all repairs were made in a satisfactory manner as well. That report is also going to include then the number that they observed and where they observed it, and the smoke detector deficiencies, as well as a projection in terms of the total number that they would see if they inspected all your buildings and all your units. Be very attentive to that projection number, because that's also looking at systemic or systematic issues or systematic health and safety issues that could be occurring on your properties that either your management or you're not taking a look at, or that your maintenance is missing, that are very, very important items for that particular property as well. If you have a smoke detector deficiency, that's going to include a star or an asterisk. The smoke detectors do not have an impact on the overall score. So even though it's a 24-hour repair, it does not take away points from your system. Do I still want to be attentive to it? Absolutely. These are health and safety. These are life-threatening scenarios. So you want to then make sure you're doing follow-up. If a case I have residents that are removing batteries, or in case, somebody keeps pulling these smoke detectors down, you want to make sure that you're properly then informing tenants not to do that. And it could be included as a lease violation if they're continuing to take away these items that are potentially impacting health and safety, not only them, but other residents as well. Be looking for that star, because that star also indicates at risk. So let's look at some property scores. Property number one that I scored a 90C star. So what is that telling me? So the 90C, the 90 is my score. That means on that property, if I was a large PHA, I'd be subject to a 3-year rotation. The C means I have at least one life-threatening, and the star means I have at least one smoke alarm on there. The C is also going to mean that I also was issued a health and safety report on that particular property, 24-hour on that repair, 24-hour on that repair, and then uploading that information to the World of HUD. Property number two, I scored a 93A. 93, good score. 93 means looking at that property every 3 years. A means no health and safety. And the fact that I don't have a star there were no smoke alarms or no smoke detector deficiencies on that property. 55A, what does that mean? Well, that means I'm going to be back. I'll see you next year. You did not have any health and safeties, either any non-life-threatening or life-threatening, so no health and safeties and no smoke alarms. So as they went through this property, they were just ding, 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 because they were taking out a lot of points. But I didn't have any health and safety issues, which would be an unusual score, but it could occur. It could occur. So 55A, I'll see you next year, and get an opportunity to get that property back into better condition as well. 93B star. What does that mean? 93 is a good score. Looking at you every 3 years. The B means I have at least one non-life threatening. And the star means I have at least one smoke alarm on that property, also to be corrected. 82C, no star. 82, not a bad score, but could be doing better. 82 means I got a 2-year rotation. The C means I have at least one life-threatening, and no star means I didn't have any smoke alarms. So in that case, also I had a LT report. In that case, I would have taken corrective action on that particular item 24 hours, and I would have uploaded that information back to the World of HUD. 71C star. 71, I'll see you next year, because you're going to be on an annual rotation for that. The C means I have at least one life-threatening, And the star means I have then a smoke detector issue on that property as well, on that amp. Out of this scores, which one would probably be the best score for a development out of at least these scores? The 93A, no star. Because a 93, rotation every 3 years. The A means that I don't have any health and safety issues on the property, and I don't have any smoke alarm issues on the property as well. So the 93A, no star, is the best of the scores that you see up here. Hopefully, then what I'm trying to achieve is 100A, no star. But 100A no stars are difficult to achieve because generally when you're thinking about your properties and you're thinking about all the things that could be classified as a deficiency, that it's very difficult to score 100, but it is possible. It is possible by being attentive to your property and by making sure that everything is in great shape on that property as well. For health and safety, these are your double dinger items that it includes air quality, it includes electrical hazards, elevator, emergency fire exits, flammable materials improperly stored, garbage and debris, other forms of hazards such as cutting hazards, infestation. And it's not just roaches that could be classified for infestation. Could be flies, could be bed bugs, could be other forms of infestation. It might not even be that I saw a rat or a mouse while I'm in that unit, but I just saw droppings from a rat or a mouse. That's also considered infestation. So droppings for those particular items as well. Now, just so you're aware, NSPIRE is going to be changing some of these protocols to the future as well. But currently, you're still under UPCS protocol, and generally they use a standard of 1 live, 2 dead in terms of infestation as well. How do you do well? Plan ahead. Have a good working schedule, have a good implementation schedule, and coordinate with your inspection processes as well. 6 months. You can't get a site ready in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. 6 months in advance, I'm looking at my site. 6 months in advance, I'm cutting those trees back, way back from my roofs, and making sure none of them are touching my roofs. I'm cutting them back from my buildings. I'm cutting my vegetation back so it's not going to be encroaching on that building and be classified as penetrating vegetation as well. I'm looking at my other areas on the site, my fencing, and those kind of issues as well, and addressing those issues. 3 months in advance, I'm also focusing on my community space and my building exteriors. 1 month in advance, I'm also refocusing on my units. 2 weeks in advance, I'm sending out my teams to go through and take a look at these units again. 3 days in advance, I'm now double checking health and safety items. I'm double checking, make sure somebody didn't remove some wall plates, making sure somebody didn't do something in a community room, make sure somebody didn't damage a window lock. Those kind of factors, those potential high ticket items. 1 day in advance. So I want to make sure all my grass is cut. I want to make sure I don't have an elevator repairman out there the day of the inspection or somebody out there doing something the day of the inspection that's potentially exposing a form of a hazard as well. So taking care of those, I probably have an early rollout of a dumpster. I'm going to make sure I got rollouts of dumpsters because tenants will start then taking stuff out of the units and putting it out on the dumpster the night before. The day that the inspector shows up is the only day that my dumpsters are overloaded as well because tenants are waiting for the last moment in order to then, take stuff out of their unit as well, thinking that their unit might be inspected. So I'm preparing the day of the inspection. I don't wait and get my personnel out when the inspectors are out. I'm getting my personnel out 2 or 3 hours in advance and double checking around those dumpster areas. Just make sure some child didn't get out there and break a bottle. That's going to be a cutting hazard as well. Remember, inspectors are going to be out there generally for 1 day. That's what they're looking on the property. And I'm preparing myself for the inspection process as well. Focus on the impact variables. Look at last year's score. Look for systematic deficiencies. And in the module number 1, we also talked about, the prevalence report. Look at that prevalence report. Use the appeal process. In fact, if he scored you under something that he shouldn't have scored you under, that's what the appeal process is supposed to do. So for example, let's say it's not my fence. Let's say it's not my property. I've put that owner on notice prior to the inspection that they've got this condition and they need to make that repair. I can't go use my federal appropriation on other people's money, or I can't use my federal money on other people's property. So I'm putting them on notice, and I do it in advance. I put it in writing to them. I send them an email. That's a form of a notice as well, that they need to make this type of repair. They don't do it. The inspector still cites me. That would be grounds for an appeal because it would be then generally a non-observable deficiency. Complete your annual inspections and do them timely. Coordinate that, but also coordinate it with activities that can be then repaired. Once you identify these deficiencies, then put then necessary budget behind it with subcontractors or temps, or use your regular workforce, but you want to then make the repairs, because otherwise they're going to be seeing exactly what you see without the repair being done. Focus. And so, you want to understand the dictionary of terms. You want to understand the updates as well. You want to then look at your last year's inspection because that has very, very valuable information in terms of the protocol. We're going to then apply then the protocol as relates to now the weighted average and how to calculate as well a weighted average of the FASS score. So I'm going to take you over to some additional reports and additional systems that we can use for this particular protocol. Now, we previously talked about the protocol and the inspection protocol. This is where HUD made the changes in terms of the protocol and also the scoring system as well. It's foundation upon an August 9th, 2012 Federal Register notice. But I'm going to take you into the notice as well. Not that we're going to go through the entire notice, but I want to take you through some critical elements in terms of the scoring system and why this notice is absolutely important to get into the hands of your staff and other support personnel in terms of how your physical score is then tabulated. And previously we were talking about then the criticalities and the severity levels as well. And so within this notice that it made revisions in the scoring system, and I'm on page 47718 of the August 9th, 2012 notice, which is also available on the REACT website. But in the center of the notice that you're going to see on that page where it has in the criticality. And criticality is the relative importance and efficiency of the inspectable item. The higher the criticality, the higher the impact, the higher the value, the more points that potentially are deducted based upon the criticality. So the way this system works is that it looks at then your areas, it looks at the deficiency within the area, it looks at the deficiency as whether it's a health and safety deficiency. It looks at the deficiency as to then the criticality, and then it looks at the deficiency as relates to the level. That all goes into the final analysis in terms of how much this item is then worth in terms of how many points are going to be deducted. So based upon the importance of the deficiency of that criticality, then it's going to have then points that are deducted. For example, a clogged drain in a kitchen is more critical than damage to a countertop. Electricals also generally run high criticalities. Plumbing also generally run high criticalities as well. Within the scoring system, and you're going to see it on page 47719, that under this new scoring system, you also have what's called a point loss cap. A point loss cap is a maximum number of points that can be deducted for a single deficiency, then can count against the overall property scores. And you'll see under here where it says site, and the maximum point deduction for a single deficiency is 7.5 points. Well, generally your site is worth 15 points. So there is, for a single deficiency, you could lose half of those points for even a single deficiency. So the point loss cap might help a little bit, but these point loss caps are relatively high. And so when you have these health and safeties that are high point values, they will still take away massive points, up to potentially 7.5. So let's say I continue to have trip hazard, trip hazard, trip hazard. Well, 7.5 would be the maximum that I'm going to get off of that one single deficiency as well. However, that's still a lot of points. Building exterior, 10 points. Well, how much is building exterior worth? 15. So there's 2/3 of your points that will be coming off for types of building exterior issues. Building systems, what are 10 points? What are we probably talking about? Water near an electrical source, potentially. Or looking at then damage to sprinkler heads, which is a health and safety issue as well. Can take away massive points. Dwelling units, 5 points. Well, the whole thing is worth 35 points. So that's still a lot of points associated with that single deficiency as well. But it does help a little bit in terms of helping improve the score for the PHA, but not as much as we would potentially anticipate. Here on page 47719, it also then includes that information on severity. Level 3s, point values of 1 in the matrix, higher the impact. What does severity measure? The extent of the damage. Now, not all items have a 3, 2, 1. Some items only have a 3. Some items only have a 2. Some items have a 1 and a 2 and not a 3. How am I going to know that? Because it's going to be here in this dictionary of terms. It's given to me. It's provided information in terms of how this scoring system is going to work. In this same page, 47719, that here I see my A, I see this chart on A, B, and C. Well, A, no health and safety. A star means no health and safety, but I do have a smoke alarm deficiency as well. B, at least one non-life threatening, but no smoke alarm. B star, at least one non-life threatening, and then I'll also have a smoke alarm. C, at least one life threatening or exigent health and safety, and C star, I'll also have at least one life threatening and at least one smoke alarm as well. So this is where you see a nice little summary in terms of what that A, B, and C means, along with what that star means as well in terms of the performance of that particular property. Over on the next page, which is 47720, on the right-hand side, you'll see where you have then your weights. The weights is how much then each one of your areas is worth. Site, if everything is present, generally worth 15 points. Building exterior, generally worth 15 points. Building systems worth 20. Common areas worth 15. Dwelling units worth 35. So within each one of these 5 inspectable areas, they have point values associated with that. If I also, based upon the inspection, score 0, and they continue to see defects on those areas, it will not go over and take away points from other areas as well. It's called a concept called proportionality. However, I'm scoring 0 in that area, which means is that my score is not going to be great for that particular area or that particular issue as well. Now, if the items also don't exist in this area, HUD does not automatically then give me points. So for example, let's say I don't have a common area on this particular amp. Well, HUD doesn't just automatically then say that I'll give you those 15 points. No, what they do is they take those points and they redistribute them to the other point systems as well. So for example, all of a sudden your common area might be, it don't exist on the area, I don't have any common area, so that is 0. But then building systems might be worth 25, dwelling units might be worth 40, and then site might be worth 20. So it's going to take the points and it's going to redistribute them to the other areas that I have on that particular development. Now, how are you going to know that? Because it's going to be contained in your report that HUD issues in terms of that particular property or that particular AMP. And I'm going to show you where that is in your report, because I need to know that, because I'm going to also focus my attention on where these point values lie and the impact of the points values. That way I can also proactively look at the deficiencies and proactively take care of these high ticket items that also have massive points associated with the deficiencies as well. Now on page 47723, here you can see how these points generally get redistributed. So site normally worth 15, building exterior worth 15, building systems worth 20, common areas worth 15, and dwelling units worth 35. But on this particular property, that it doesn't contain then all of the elements of the common area. So it's saying that they have now, for this property, site is worth 12.5, building exterior worth 18.6, building systems worth 24.2, common areas worth 3.7, and dwelling units worth 40.9. So they took then points from the site and they took points from the common areas and they then redistributed those points to the building exterior and building systems and then dwelling units. So all of a sudden dwelling units, which is normally worth 35 on this particular property, is going to be worth 40.9. In other words, if I have a deficiency in those areas, that deficiency is also going to count off for additional points, because that's where they redistribute the points to those particular sub areas in the inspectable area as well. And your inspection report is going to give you that information that then carried over from one year to the next as well, unless I've changed inspectable items by doing certain things like modernization or other activities on the site as well. Now, within the dictionary of terms, this starts on page number 47724. These charts in here are absolutely critical because they go to the heart of the scoring system. So within site, I've got fencing and gates, I have my grounds, I have my health and safety, I have my mailboxes, the signage, the market appeal, which goes to graffiti as well, and litter, parking, roadways, driveways, playground areas and equipment, refuse disposal, retaining walls, storm drainage, and then walkway and steps. Within each one of these areas, then you're going to see also it has a nominal weight. The higher the nominal weight, the higher the impact of that particular item in terms of deficiency is going to then take away points. But you'll also see over here where it talks about criticality. And it's going to give you information on the criticality. The higher the criticality, the higher the impact. And so, for example, I now see a health and safety. It says air quality, propane, natural gas, or methane, gas detected. 5, criticality. 3, LT. This is a heavy hitter. This is the one that potentially could take away that 7.5 points, or this is going to take away 6 points on that site. It is a heavy hitter. Don't be out there, and then find these conditions and not make those necessary repairs. Make sure you're putting priority behind it as well. Here you see an electrical hazard, exposed wires. 5, 3, LT. Heavy ticket item, heavy amount of points. Water leaks near these electrical sources on the site. 5, 3, LT. Inspectors don't have any prerogative. They find it, they're going to record it, and it's going to take away massive points. Here you see sharp edges. 3, 3, NLT. Tripping hazards, 3, 3, NLT. Massive points associated with these as well. Here's where that infestation, 3, 3, it's a health and safety, an NLT. So what I would do if I was running an agency out here, I would be going through this dictionary of terms and highlighting these areas and educating my staff that when you see these items and these particular items in the protocol, focus on LT first and focus on NLTs, but also focus on these 5s and 4s because they also have massive points associated with them as well. Storm drainage, damage obstructed, limbs in front of that area, blocking that storm drain. 5, again, potential 3, even though it is a NLT, it has massive points because of the criticality and the high criticality level associated with it as well. Building exterior, looking at your doors, looking at these fire escapes, looking at these foundations, health and safety issues as well. You're going to see these health and safeties continue to repeat. And looking at these 5s and looking at these health and safety issues because it has massive points associated with it as well. Looking at your lighting, looking at your roofs, walls, and windows on the building exterior and looking for these 5s. And you'll see over here where that FHEO has a 0-point value tied to it. So it doesn't take away points, even though you might be cited on it as well. That doesn't mean I don't want to be attentive to it. I still want to program some funds out here to maybe remove some of these barriers on my sites as well and accessibility. So still program funds for capitalization to try to remove these barriers to the sites as well. Part of your 504 analysis. Building systems. Looking at that domestic water, you're going to see a very high nominal weight. And next thing you see is a leaking in a central water system, a 4 and a 3. And when we think about domestic water leakage on a main central system, we think about that 12-inch pipe coming into our particular area as well. That's not the way HUD thinks. That's not how the inspector thinks as well. So in that case, it might be leaking on a seal caulk on the exterior of my building. That is a building system. And in that, it's going to trigger a level 3 criticality of 4. So you want to make sure that you're going around and checking your buildings and making sure I'm not having any dripping faucets in there as well. That's considered a domestic water leaking central system as well. Look at that electrical system. Here I've got, that missing breakers or fuses, 5, 3 LTs. So this is giving you at your fingertips these major impact variables and paying attention to these 5s and 3s and then the LTs as well. Here's a sprinkler head. 5, 3, and LTs. I've got then, paint on that area or missing. Sprinkler head or damaged unit to that as well. In addition, now I'm looking at my common areas. We know the common areas generally worth 15 points. And you'll see in here that also I have then nominal values. And then I also will see a difference in nominal values, generally where my tenant also has an exposure to the area. Then it also has a higher nominal value. So for example, your community room, your daycares, your corridors, your hallways have higher nominal values. In other words, if the defect is found there, it's going to take away more points than it would be back in your office area. So not that I don't want them to repair to take place back in my office area, but I'm going to have them focus first on my community rooms. I'm going to have them focus first on my daycare because that's where the bigger points also lie. So priorities and setting priorities and going in and focusing on these areas as well. Laundry rooms, tenants have access and, and, and could be injured in those areas as well. So it has a higher nominal value. There, your lobby has only a nominal value of 5. Those offices, nominal value of 5. So these repeat themselves over in here. So my priorities are going to be first focus on these areas where tenant has access to, and then I'll focus on these other areas next in order to get my points up, in order to get a higher rating for my PHA as well. Here's where we see the protocol for the dwelling units. Dwelling units, we know, is worth 35 of those points. And here you can see bathrooms have a very high nominal value, 15, and kitchens also have a very high nominal value, 15. So as my maintenance is also focusing on my units, have them focus on those bathrooms and kitchens first, which also have generally high nominal values and higher points associated with it as well. And then I'll focus on the other space. I want to always be checking those bedrooms and making sure they're not blocking forms of egress in those bedrooms also on 3 stories or below, because that also has massive points that also can be taken away in those areas as well. But here you see over here, missing door. And when we think about missing door, we think about, well, there's no door there. But also they took down the door, but they didn't take down all the hardware associated with that door. That is classified as a missing door. 5, then potentially 3 NLT. Missing door in a closet would take me just to a 1. But if they remove the hardware, if they remove the door, make sure they're also removing the hardware associated with that door as well. Here's also where we pick up those health and safeties, looking for those electrical hazards. You can see they keep repeating themselves, 5, 3s, LTs. So once you identify and build your systems in place, if you can see it, they can see it, they can see it, going to be associated points associated with it, and I want to make that corrective action before they're coming to the property as well. Within the dictionary of terms, you're going to see in this appendix 2, this is where they also then talk about then the levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. So this provided you a summary. This provides you then the detail associated with that item. And so we're now looking in this dictionary, and the first place they're going to be covering is the site. So it's going to be talking about fencing. And here you see that for a non-security, non-safety fence, that it can only rise to a level 2. It's its only option. And a non-security, non-safety fence then contains holes or deterioration damage greater than 25% of the fence. For a security safety fence, has a different classification. It's going to be at least a 4-foot fence that also covers that area. And it says level 1, security safety, or gate contains small holes, less than 12 by 12, in less than 25% of the fence. Take me to a 1. Level 2, security safety, small holes, less than 12 by 12, in more than 25% of the fence. Level 3, a hole greater than 12 by 12, or any form of missing section or missing gates as well. Take me to a level 3. So which one has a higher impact? Well, a security safety fence. That's what it's telling me. And then depending on the level of deficiency, they're recorded as a 1, a 2, or a 3 in that protocol. So this provides me then the detail. This I want to get into the hands of the staff so they understand, these dimensions. They understand these requirements. They understand, the water and accumulation of water, whether it's ponding, and what impact it's going to have on the score as well. So this is the original scoring system that HUD published back in 2012, which still comes into play, but HUD has also tweaked the system through changes since the 2012. And so in that 2012 and the changes, these changes are now occurring through what's called then my REACT compilation bulletin. And your most recent bulletin is on October 2nd of 2017 as well. So HUD is changing the protocol from time to time, and you want to then also stay up to date in terms of the most recent protocol with the most recent regulatory process as well. So this is where HUD publishes these compilation bulletins. This is also available on the REACT portion of the website and the physical assessment subsystem under PHAS. Within this bulletin, this is where they make the changes. They provide these updates. They will change then the terms. They will change the protocol. They will then change the instructions on how an inspector is also inspecting property, or what is also considered a deficiency as well. And you'll see on page then 4 of the notice where they've also now included this industry standard repair. This is where they brought in the protocol saying that if you're making repairs, but it's a non-industry standard type of repair, that it's going to then count points against me as well. In other words, looking at the repair, but making sure they're using good industry standards on the type of repairs that they're making as well. And so it's saying that if they see these items, they will still record it. And they're also enter what's called an NIS into it, a non-industry standard. And a non-industry standard will also then take away points from your scoring system, even though a repair was made. So it's not matching. It's not then often these properties are making repairs to walls, floors, ceilings, and the new materials are not exact. So it's saying use the best judgment, but within this scoring system, it's also going to tell them a percentage of that particular carryover as well. I try to want to make sure I'm trying to give it the appearance that there never was a repair there. But if I'm using a non-industry standard, then he will then indicate that the repair was made, but the repair is in a non-industry standard, not using the same texture or deviation from, giving the form of aesthetics as well, not doing it in a good workmanship-like manner. Within here, we also want to make sure we're providing him information on your 504 units, because when they're inspecting 504 units, they're going to apply slightly different protocols. So for example, if a resident's also damaging the walls with a wheelchair, in the protocol or in the dictionary of terms, it says that's not necessarily a defect as well. Or I'm now taking down a door and I'm leaving up the hinges in that. That's not necessarily considered a defect. That's also in the dictionary of terms. I'm going to provide him information, boiler information, fire alarm systems information in terms of the testing, smoke, fire extinguisher information, if they were then also repaired by an outside interest as well. Given that letter that also indicates that these repairs, so in case one's missing a tag, it's not considered necessarily a defect. I'm going to make sure I'm then providing 5 files to them that also has that lead paint form is in there as well, that I'm giving it to tenants. That's that blue book. That's also beware the hazards of lead-based paint. That's going to be a part of every file that I gave it to them at the time, generally mostly at the time of move-in or at the time of lease signing as well. And he's going to be looking for that. Doesn't matter whether the property is a pre-78 or a post-78, all files should contain that information, and you want to make sure you're giving it to all residents as well. Even in your elderly buildings, it is now a requirement under the lead protocol. In terms of conducting the inspection, he's going to be inspecting that property, and he's generally going to be recording the deficiencies as an NA, not applicable, NOD, no observable defect, OD, level 1, level 2, level 3, and an H&S if one exists on the property as well. And he's going to record that information as DCD. You should not be keeping information in some other source. That's all within this bulletin. He generally might carry with him a tape measure, a flashlight, and a method to then inspect these areas 8 feet or above. In other words, those smoke alarms, to be able to push that button as well. So you might have a collapsible rod. If not, you want to be carrying those kind of items as well. So you should not be carrying canned smoke, or you should not be carrying some other form of measuring devices such as a wheel or anything else. He's going to be making visual observations and estimating those areas based upon his visual observation. Within that, he's going to record those deficiencies. He's going to then take photos of the areas as well and record then level threes as well as health and safeties and take photos. It's also changed the protocol on, whether we have to provide any forms of ladders or going up to the areas as well. He'll make a visual observation from those areas as well and not necessarily require a ladder to be brought out. Just like every inspector, he is still subject to QCs. He's still subject to collaborative quality assurance or limited quality assurance as well, or quality control inspections that will be done by HUD or follow-up in case he's also not performing in accordance with the protocol. If there are two similar deficiencies within the same area, he'll record that under a single deficiency as well. However, that if there is a health and safety, he'll also record that as a independent deficiency as well, which is then included in this. He's going to then notify me of the health and safety. He's going to provide me a copy of that report and then record the information. And I have 24 hours to make those necessary repair on those health and safety, 72 hours to upload the information from HUD. He's going to validate the vacancies. He's going to take that profile of the property as well. All going to be recorded in the DCD that's also going to generate then his sample units. If there is any rescheduling that's necessary because of inclement conditions or other kind of conditions as well, then they'll reset that inspection based upon severe weather or other things that might be going on that property. But generally, most inspectors want to get that inspection taken care of, if at all possible, on the day of that inspection that they've scheduled as well. He will upload the information upon the completion, and it goes into the world of HUD, and generally then the report then is available for the PHAs, generally within then 5 days of the inspection as well. This compilation bulletin, latest one, also helps define the buildings and whether it's a building or whether it's a part of another building as well, and how to record then that building data into the systems. Now, why is that so important? Because in the matrix, it further divides then your building and the accountability of the buildings, and based upon the number of buildings and based on the number of dwelling units in that property. If I also have these structures out here that, let's say, are on my site and doesn't have utilities to it and no permanent foundation, it's not considered a building in the UPCS protocol. However, it is still subject to inspection under health and safety items as well. So it's not recorded as a building, but it is subject to the inspection under health and safety. So for example, let's say I had a broken window on that particular area. Well, a broken window is also creating a cutting hazard. A cutting hazard then is a health and safety issue, and if it's observable, it is then a deficiency as well. Now for scattered sites, this changed some of the protocol on scattered sites. So scattered sites also says that he will validate the scattered site, but then on the scattered site, if the building is part of the systems or the unit is part of the systems, then the site on that scattered site is subject to the inspection. I want to take you over to some other changes in this protocol. So for vacant units, he should not be inspecting vacant units in public housing. This is over on page 29. So he should not be inspecting a vacant units. However, he will validate that the unit is vacant. So as you're going around on the inspection, he will then might go by that particular unit just to validate that in fact it's vacant. He should not then enter the unit because he's not inspecting that unit, but he will just validate that in fact it's a vacant unit. If you let him in that unit to inspect a unit, he will then record any deficiencies that he also observes. So again, he's not to inspect vacant units. This is also where they brought additional information in and changed the protocol on the dictionary of terms, further helped define fencing and gates and siding as well, or on the sites. Vegetation that should not be presented, that observable deficiency on the site in the guttering system as well. But also it helped clarify other forms of vegetation that is not considered a defect. So for example, I got this small growth that's growing up on a fence. Well, some inspectors were then citing that vegetation and saying then damage to that fence, and HUD says no, not necessarily. So this then brings in additional photos and says that's not necessarily deficiency. However, if it is pulling that fence down or going into an interior space in that particular vegetation as well, those would be examples that could have an impact on that particular fence or that particular area. That small amount of vegetation there, not necessarily recording it as a deficiency. Inspectors in some areas were recording these as deficiencies as site erosion. That is not site erosion. That is not causing then a particular deficiency, and HUD says that is not a recordable deficiency. This bare area here, not necessarily recordable deficiency underneath these trees. In addition to that, when I also have trees that have these roots, that is maybe greater than a 3/4 inch differential. Check to see whether it's in that walking area. And if it's not in a general walking area as well, then it's not necessarily considered a deficiency. You'll be looking for paths that tenants also take. If they're walking across those areas, that would be a path, and that could be a deficiency known as a tripping hazard as well. Obviously, this is an erosion, advanced state of erosion, and it should be recorded. Obviously, this also creating an example of displaced soil, creating erosion problems as well, rutting and erosion. 4 more consecutive steps. Now, handrail on one side would be sufficient as well. 4 more consecutive steps. Here, 3 steps. This would not necessarily have a handrail here. This would have a handrail on at least one side of these steps because it's 4 or more consecutive. Walk, walk, walk. Walk, walk. Then walk, walk, walk up these steps. So this one not necessarily recorded. Wouldn't need a handrail here unless I had more than a 30-inch fall as well. This area has both steps on the site and also the unit steps. Both of these 4 more consecutive steps would require then handrails, independent areas. They would record it, this under site, they'd record this under then the dwelling unit. 2 independent actions, 2 independent repairs. Now this also brought in additional protocol as relates to these non-industry standards. And there you can see some repairs that would be non-industry standard type of repairs. And they will then count against you. It also brought in some additional protocol as relates to electrical. And under the electrical, that if I have what's called these low voltage systems, such as the doorbells, or such as cable TV, or such as telephones. Those are low voltage systems. So if they're also missing a cover off that low voltage system, it is not considered a defect. It is not considered a recordable deficiency. And that is now found in this compilation bulletin as well. So not to record that as a deficiency. But if it is a high voltage system, then 110 or then higher, of course, any of those is going to be recorded as a deficiency as well. Don't forget, when you're doing your pre-inspection, be looking for where somebody has done a knockout and didn't replace these knockout areas as well. That's exposing then electrical. That is a health and safety. That is an LT. High points associated with that as well. Now, on these zip ties, under the protocol as well, that go around your units and just make sure all these zip ties that haven't gotten brittle, haven't gotten sun-baked, haven't gotten worn out, where you can just snap them off with your finger, replace them as well. Make sure you then double check those areas on those zip ties, and then put a new zip tie on those areas to enclose them, encase them. But in case I need to get back in there, it's really easy to access that particular area through the zip ties. So this compilation bulletin changed much of the protocol in the dictionary of terms. I strongly encourage you to download the compilation bulletin and then update your staff and get the latest into their hands as well. Within the inspection protocol, that we also have then our inspection reports. This inspection report is the foundation then of what they found to the property. And so, for example, this is a report that's going to be posted out on the site. This property here scored a 58 C star. What is that telling me? Well, it's a multifamily. It's a 58 C star. The 58 means not so good, going to be back next year. The C means I have at least one life-threatening, and the star means I have at least one smoke detector deficiency as well. Within the inspection report, then it's also going to tell you how many units were sampled and how many buildings also came in the sample. Out of the total of 347, I'm running 307 actual units that would be coming up potentially with an 85% occupancy on this particular property. So I'm probably not scoring well under my FASS indicator as well for this particular PHA. And out of that, then my sample says I looked at 25 of those units. Within then the detail of the protocol, then it's also then telling me on this particular property, site is worth 21, building exterior worth 17, building systems worth 13, common areas worth 7.17, units worth 48. So you can see on this particular property, it didn't have common areas, so they redistributed those points, and they gave a lot of those points that normally dwelling units is worth 35. They now gave these dwelling units of 48. Site, normally worth 15, is worth 21. Building exterior, worth 15, so they gave that 17. And building systems, normally worth 20, they now gave those 13. So it redistributed. Now, this is the only place where you're going to see this information. This is important information because this is also how I prepare myself for the next year in terms of where my points lie within my systems. So in the inspection, that generally that within the site they found then I had defects, and for my general conditions 8.21 points was taken off on the site. Building exterior 1.96, dwelling units 11.30, which I generally would have recorded 77.56 on this site. However, because I also had health and safety, that on the site, I also lost an additional 5.95 points specifically related to health and safety items. These are these double dingers. So in terms of my points, I didn't lose 8.21 points. I lost then almost 14 points, which means that I scored 7. 7 out of 21 potential points for this particular item. Good or not so good? Not so good. Not so good. And I also had some health and safety. Out of my dwelling units that I normally would have scored 36, but because I had health and safety, they took away an additional almost 13 points for health and safety. So out of the potential for 48 points, that I scored 23, less than half of the points available under my dwelling units, just from these 25 units that they ran from the sample. So my overall score, 58.13, with some additional LT items, hence the C, and also has some additional smoke alarm issues that didn't take away points, but they're still health and safety. So let's take a look now at the detail on this particular property. The next area that you see is then the health and safety report. So it's saying that out of the property that I had then a NLT, a non-life threatening, one on my building, and I had 18 within my dwelling units, and I had one on my site, which gives me a total of 20 defects for non-health and safety alone. So if I looked at your whole property and looked at every one of your units, I generally estimate that I would find 225 of these items on your property, a relatively high number. Because if you also think about it, that out of my dwelling units, I only looked at 25, and now 18 of those units that I also saw defects. Life-threatening. So life-threatening on my buildings, 3. If I was looking at all your buildings, I generally would have saw 10. Within my dwelling units, that I saw 15. If I looked at all your dwelling units, I would have saw generally 184. A very potentially high percentage. Smoke alarms. Out of the 25 I looked at, I saw 19. Out of those 19 is a projection that if I looked at every one of your property, everyone on this property, I would have saw 223, a relatively high number for this as well. Hence the results of my 58 as well. Now, when I'm looking at these items, I'm just not going in and taking care of these 3 that came up on life, health, and safety. I want to go around the rest of my buildings as well to see and double check. Remember, they're going to be back. They're going to be back next year. And I don't want these conditions to continue to exist. I want to set systems up in place as well. And let's take a look now at the further detail. This also indicates on my property that I have some systemic or systematic issues that are continuing to occur as well on that property. So for example, that now I have refrigerators. And my refrigerators, if I was looking at it, I found 12, and out of the total that I was looking at, 28, so 48 of those potential, 48% of those are showing defects. It could be seal problems, it could be other kind of problems as well. On my grounds, erosion. And I'm finding that erosion on the property, and that's going to take away quite a few points. Overgrown vegetation, again, taking away points. My market appeal, graffiti to the site, but these are where I see my heavy hitters. On my site, I have tripping hazards. In that tripping hazard, it only took one. It only took one. And then also that lead hazard, which on the files as well indicates that I have a problem in that. So that tripping hazard, potentially, there's where my 5 points on that tripping hazard also lies as well. Windows and potentially damage to screens. About 44% of my units had that. Smoke detectors, again, 41%. Systematic errors. Which one of those did not take away points? Well, smoke detectors didn't take away points, even though it's a 24-hour. FHEO did not take away points. But I also want to program some money to take a look at that as well. Now, the Lex is giving you detail in terms of what units that were inspected, but I want to go over to the detail in terms of the point reduction as well. So this next in the summary area is also whether I had boilers, fire alarm systems, lead-based paint forms, sprinkler systems as well, and what I provided in that makeup. But here you see in the next area of your scoring system, now I'm looking at sites. And it's saying this site is worth 21 points, but this provides me the detail. So that place where I had that erosion or rutting, level two, 3.97 points just associated with that one defect. Overgrown penetrating vegetation found on 4 places to the site. Level 2, 2.98 points associated with that. Graffiti, 1.27. But look at that tripping hazard. In that tripping hazard, that's a level 3. That is a health and safety. That is when worth 5.96 points. So there is where my points lie. There's where my points lie. Health and safety. Those are those double dingers. So out of the potential of 21 points, I scored 7. This provides me then the detail, and it also will provide me that information that I don't want to keep repeating. Here's my buildings and building information, but look at where my points lie. Here I've got blocked egress. Level 3, health and safety, LT, 1.48 points associated with that single deficiency alone. Here again, electrical hazard, health and safety, LTs, level 3s, 1.48. So not only do I want to take care of these health and safeties, but I want to take care of these high ticket items. And it all goes back to that dictionary of terms. It all goes back to focusing on the matrix, to focus on these items that have then high point values associated with it as well. Now we're going to take now a sample housing authority. We're going to go through an exercise that is also going to then show you how that weighted average works in the protocol as well. So I'll now go over to my report. It'll take me a couple of minutes to get over there. But anyway, we're going to go over to the report, and I'll walk you through then a evaluation system and how your points are derived based upon then your amps as well. So we're now going to walk through an exercise which is now going to take then the evaluation based upon then your PHAS. And here we have the sample housing authority. And the sample housing authority is now made up of then 3 amps. This agency has a total of 520 units, so it's considered then a large or a moderate size agency, but is subject then of the additional protocol as relates to the 90 factor and the 80 factor and the 70 factors as well. Each year they're going to be evaluated under the FASS protocol, but then it's also going to be based upon then the weighted average of these amps. So within these 3 amps that they have, we have then Leah Manor has 155 family units, Jacob Gould has 158 family units, and then Audrey Court has 207 family units, family apartments as well. All properties are less than 28 years old on the DOFA date, and they are not in a high poverty census tract as well when it comes to the MAS indicator. Your supervisor has now requested that you've now estimate your FAS based upon the last 6 months of performance, and then based upon how you're then scoring under these systems currently as well. So here we're now looking at now my physical score. And under Leah Manor, which is amp number 1, I want to then go down now to its PHAS score, the physical score. And it scored then 92A. Property number 2, or amp number 2 on Jacob Gould, it scored 87C. Property number 3, which is Audrey Court, scored 82B. Now, what does that mean? Well, 92. That means that subject property is then going to be subject to an inspection then every 3 years. The A means no health and safety, no smoke alarm issues were found on that property as well because it does not have a star. 87C star, 87 is a score, meaning it's subject to inspection every 2 years. The C means at least one life-threatening, and the star means I have at least one smoke alarm. 82B, no star. subject to inspection every 2 years. B means I have at least one non-life-threatening and no smoke alarm deficiencies on the property. But we're now going to take these scores and we're going to convert it then into a 40-point system to come up with our overall score based upon the weighted average. So we're now looking at then the physical inspection under the PHAS score for each amp. Amp number 1 scored 92. Amp number 2 scored 87. Amp number 3 scored 82. But I'm going to take these numeric scores that the amp scored under and I'm going to put it into now a 40-point system. And so in this 40-point system, I'm now going to take then the 92. 92 times 0.40, that gives me a score of 36.8 on a 40-point system. Amp number 2 scored an 87 times 0.40, that gives me 34.8 for that particular amp on a 40-point system. Amp number 3 scored 82, so on a 40-point system, that gives me 32.8. I now come down to determine then the weighted average on those particular amps. And I now take that score of 36.8. I now multiply that times 155 units. That's going to give me 5,704 for amp number 1. Amp number 2 scored 34.8. 34.8 times 158 units, that gives me a product of 5,498.4. Amp number 3 scored 32.8 times 204 units, so that gives me 6,789.6. I now add those variables. So then 5,704 plus 54.98 plus then 6,789 or 90, then that's going to then give me 17,992. 17,992 then divided by 520. So that gives me an overall score for the PHA under the weighted average, once I do the weighted average of the amps, now of a PHAS score of 34.6. 34.6 is now my physical score, now based upon the weighted averages of these particular amps. Am I doing good? Well, potentially, then out of 40 points, I scored 34.6. I'm averaging somewhere slightly below the 90 threshold, but I'm averaging in the 80 realm. So not necessarily great, but still good. Could I still make high performer? Well, yeah, I could if, again, I'm scoring well under the other indicators as well. So under my physical score, I'm going to have then 34.6. 34.6. And let's say next year that you're not scheduled for inspection, you're on the rotation. So at that point in time, I'll then carry my 34.6 then variable forward until I have then a reinspection on those other properties as well on the 2-year rotation, and then based upon the 3-year rotation, then they'll update those variables as well. So when we're looking at now, we're going to drop back over to our PowerPoint. We're back to our PowerPoint on the world of PHAS. This concludes then the section on the physical inspection or the PHAS portion as well. In order to score well, or in order to do well under this indicator, plan ahead, be proactive, understand then the dictionary of terms, understand then these point value systems and how certain items and certain deficiencies can take away massive points, and it's difficult to recover from that as well. We again wish to thank you for joining us under the protocol under the FASS protocol. This concludes the PHAS portion on that particular module. We'll next be going into the MAS portion. Don't forget to visit the other modules as well that we have in here, but this will then conclude our PHAS. We wish to thank you again for joining us, and we will see you again on the next module, which is the MAS, the Management Assessment Subsystem. Again, thank you and good day.